We'll get started. Thank you very much, everyone joining our webinar today, and welcome. We are going to spend the next hour, although prepared comments won't be the hour, there'll be a Q&A section, but we're going to spend the next hour talking about early retirement, smart financial moves, and medical insurance planning. And I know many of you joining the webinar are clients of Summitry, but there are some of you who may not be, or some of you who may be listening to an ultimate recording that do not know exactly who we are. So Summitry is a wealth management firm in the San Francisco Bay Area. We manage about $2.5 billion for individuals and families. And just a few words on what we do and who we are. So we view our mandate as, a company who really helps people who live here navigate all of the really special opportunities that exist from living here. But also there's lots of complex or complications around just the cost of living here is high. And so just how do you navigate those things where you're thriving through all of the opportunities, but also taking care of the things that you need to take care of while you're here? Now, what do we do? I mean, that is financial planning and investment management. And on the investment management side, it's institutional grade investing, where we're investing primarily in individual securities for our clients. And on the financial planning side, all the kind of things that covers around retirement planning and education planning, cash flow planning, and more. So that's what we do and who we are. Okay, so who are we? Who's joining the call today? So my name is Joe Martin. I'm one of the founding partners of Summitry. I'm also the firm's chief client experience officer and a senior financial advisor. So I work with many of the firm's clients who have been clients for decades and multiple generations too. And it's been a real pleasure and joy. And then joining us also is Mandy Pham. She is a senior financial advisor with Summitry, and the designations that you see in her name: chartered financial analyst, enrolled agent, and certified financial planner. So she brings a lot of knowledge and expertise to all of the areas of financial planning, and we're just so blessed to have her as an advisor to our clients. And Jeff Foss. So Jeff Foss is the director of Rose Insurance. And so Jeff has spent the better part of 25 years in various aspects of the insurance services business, in the last 15 years on the personal lines of health insurance side. And the thing I want to say about Jeff is, as a firm that provides financial planning to clients, there's a lot of areas where we don't have expertise. And so we surround ourselves with wonderful partners who have expertise in those areas. And Jeff is one of those in all things health insurance. And one of the what I want to say is I've sent a number of clients to Jeff, and invariably they come back and say that the conversation that they had with him was incredibly productive and helpful and valuable, because taking care of your health is something very important, and you want to make sure that you're making the best kind of decision you can for the right cost. So we are so grateful for Jeff for joining us today and for the work that he's done for so many of our clients. So just as an overview of what we'll be talking about today, so for the agenda, Mandy will kick us off talking about a lot of the financial planning preparation to get ready for work optional. It's another way of thinking about retirement when you don't need to work anymore for a paycheck. Jeff will then share insights on how to navigate the medical insurance market, getting the best coverage for you and your family, and paying the right price for that. I will spend some time talking about the mental preparedness. There are lots of conversations that people have around the financial and the health aspects, but then there's also just all of the psychology around what is this time in your life and what do you need to do to make sure that it's a successful time in your life. And then we'll just wrap up on directing everyone to a blog that we wrote on some things that you can take advantage of from a tax perspective before the April 15th tax filing deadline, or the first one. And then we'll open it up for Q&A. So what you'll do is you can put questions in the Q&A box on your screen, and then I'll moderate that part of the call, and we'll just ask your questions of Mandy, Jeff, and I'll answer what questions I can as well. So with that, I'd love to kick it over to Mandy.
Thank you, Joe. And next, please. Yeah, so as the chair of the Financial Planning Committee for Summitry, I got tasked to think about idea for different financial planning webinar. We host our financial planning webinar twice a year. And one of the things that struck me is I can't believe we have not done something like this before. Many of our clients have their financial plan, but some have not invested time for a financial plan. And without a clearly laid out financial plan, the thought of being work optional or planning for retirement can be quite overwhelming. You might have heard some of your neighbor down the street did 10 million to retire. Doesn't mean you also need the same amount. Does it apply to you too? And what about medical insurance? That's one of the biggest questions that we get asked from clients. You always get your coverage through work. Now, without work, were you going to be uninsured until you Medicare? What come in between? Or there's abundant information on the internet talking about 4% rule, or is it 3.5% now? And 4% of what? Or 25%, you need 25 years worth of your annual expenses, but you don't know what it means to be your annual expenses. Does it count all of those one-off expenses that seem to happen every year? And the biggest question of all, what am I missing? What is the one thing that I could do now that position myself better for the future? So let me share with you a story about a client that I met a couple years ago. Let's call them Dave and Kate. And next, please. So this is very typical of many young clients who very burned out at work that want to be retired or being work optional sooner rather than later. So Dave and Kate, 44 and 46 years old, they've been working in high tech practically since college, so since 22, so it's over 2 decades, being in a very high trust tech career in the Bay Area. They have 2 kids, 14 and 15, and who seem to have all kind of extracurricular activity weekday and weekend, and they can't seem to have any time for themselves. And they really, really burnt out. That's the impression that I got from them since the first meeting. And if you can unblur the information. So they very responsible early on, been investing and accumulate about 6 million in liquid assets. But you probably also notice on the right-hand side is their expenses. With the 2 kids, it gets expensive living in the Bay Area. So as you can see, including taxes, they seem to spend most of their money, and money can feel tight even when they're working and make almost $1 million a year. And I can't forget the first time I met with them. Dave said, "Mandy, we make almost $1 million a year, and somehow money feel tight. I don't understand. I can't work for another 20 years. There have to be another way." And then when we start peel out the onions, you can see one of the things that Dave didn't count is all of the RSU that he doesn't sell. So that 135,000 at the bottom is all meta share that he didn't sell. So that doesn't count to what he thinking about as spending. Also, many of the expenses that they currently paying for the private school, the extracurricular activity, going to go away. So that's 120,000 that out of the picture in a few years when they go to college. They happen to have 529 that grandparent health fund for. Then the mortgage, they pay almost 50,000 a year on a $600,000 mortgage. So that's going away in the next decade or so. So when we start building out the financial plan and then building out expenses for pre-Medicare medical expenses, which Jeff will talk about, and next please. And I was able to show them the projection of even adjusted for inflation. Their portfolio actually stabilized. They're not spending off their portfolio even if they retire just in 3 years. And you can probably see from this, the first few years when many of those expenses are still high, it's going down a little bit and then it's stabilized in the future when mortgage going away, when there's no longer kid-related expenses. Next, please. And of course, we also talk about what we can do to make it better. So for someone who retire in their mid 40 or being work optional in their mid 40, there's several years of low taxable income that we can convert some of the $2 million in IRA money to reduce the future tax liability. Practically, we get to pay to convert to Roth, paying 10-15% marginal bracket, as opposed to if we wait until they have to take out funds from their IRA, they would likely pay a 28, 32%. So it's significant tax saving. And then there's a lot of unanswered questions that I know they think about, and that keeping them up at night, like if I truly become work optional and don't have a paycheck anymore and have to depend on my portfolio, what if the market pull back 20%? What would that look like? Or what a question that I get asked a lot recently is, if we go into an extended period of time when we have higher inflation and my expenses keep going up, what does it mean for my financial situations? There might be also inspirational thing that they want to do in this particular play. They want to make gift to their kid for anything, for the wedding, or if they choose to, the kid can use it for a house down payment. So that's something we can also build in. I don't know if Dave and Kate going to retire in 3 years. They may not, but the idea of knowing that they can walk away in 3 years, get to the point of not relying on their paycheck in 3 years is something that I can physically see a sigh of relief in our meeting. Next, please. And this is another case study that I would like to share. This is another reason why I think the financial planning process is a very meaningful process, because it's almost forced the client. Many times husband and wife don't even have time to talk about what they want to accomplish for their financial goal. But this creates a mechanism for us to talk about what we want to accomplish next in our next chapter in life. In this case, this is just one single client, and part of our discussion, I realized that one of the things that Suzanne very passionate about is her engineering school in Kansas. So it's a small school, but it have done really well for her. She's really want to get back to the school. So we were able to put in a 500,000 gift, what a very highly appreciated NVIDIA share during the time that she make over $1 million a year. And I'm not going to bother you with the detailed calculation, but through the saving of not having to pay 37% tax on the capital gain in selling NVIDIA and be able to deduct at the highest marginal bracket, the net cost to Suzanne for 100,000 worth of charitable donation now is only less than 20,000. So $1, $5 for charity only costs her $1. And we were able to leverage to make something very meaningful to her happen. And if we have wait until after she retired to talk about this, we'll lose out on the opportunity of being able to deduct at the highest marginal bracket, and the net cost to her would be significantly higher. Next, please, Anne. I just want to point out another thing that clients don't tend to think about, but we see it more and more common, is the idea of having another house or another big financial purchase when they have more time to enjoy, like a vacation home, for example. When you're still working and have very high taxable income, your debt and income ratio is very favorable, and that gives you a lot of options, and that give you the best possible interest rate in any interest rate condition. If you delay until you retire and potentially not working and not having high taxable income, even with a large portfolio, the option can be limited, and it can have a huge impact. Like as I do a quick calculation here, 1% difference in interest can cost over 200,000 more in interest on $1 billion loan for 30 years. So it's if we can somehow think about this in advance and actually make it happen in advance of your finally stop working, that would be a lot easier and more favorable. Next, please, Anne. And just my key takeaway here before I transition to Jeff is, again, you don't need to wait until 65 and plan for the medical insurance premium and out-of-pocket cost pre-Medicare. It can be significant, but plan for it like any other financial goal. So now I would transition to Jeff to talk about the detail of the medical insurance.
Great. Mandy, thanks for the intro. I realize that the vast majority of this audience has probably relied on employer-sponsored health insurance for pretty much the entirety of their professional lives. So in that scenario, the thought of having to kind of navigate the individual market for what might be the first time, make decisions that will have an impact on how you protect yourself, your family, and your assets ultimately, can feel a bit daunting initially, but I'm here today to say that that does not have to be the case. So we're going to spend the next 12 or 15 minutes to just lay a basic foundation around health insurance such that you'll be more well equipped to handle the transition, or at least know how to approach the transition when that time comes. More specifically, we'll touch briefly on COBRA, when that might be a good opportunity. Of course, private health insurance and how Covered California plays in that realm. We'll talk briefly on Medicare, address some of the kind of methodologies behind objective decision-making and some of the pitfalls that you'll want to avoid. And then lastly, we'll close it out with just some high-level examples. So at least we walk away with some general concept or a rough order of magnitude as to what types of prices we're looking at for healthcare. So on that front, we're going to talk about COBRA to begin with. So COBRA, next slide, please. COBRA is simply a continuation of your employer-sponsored plan. They no longer subsidize the cost. You pay 100%, but it's effectively keeping the status quo. It is a federal mandate, so everyone will have the option to take COBRA, and it will be available to you for up to 18 months. There are some outlier scenarios in which you can extend it. Those are, again, rare exceptions to the rule. So for the purpose today, you have access for 18 months. I spend a lot of time helping people compare COBRA to what's available on the individual market, and I can tell you that it's a roughly 50-50. So half of the people in the audience today, COBRA will be a better option. If we just remove the economics entirely, we can say there are really three key influencers as to whether or not it's worth consideration. The first one is that COBRA, or employer-sponsored plans in general, they do have larger, more national doctor networks. So if you split your time between states, that may be something of value to you. That leads into just more continuity of care as well. It's not necessary for some, but if you have a family member who might be on a, I'll say, medical treatment journey, well, avoiding the disruption of potentially finding new doctors or having to start over with new professionals, again, can be daunting. So from a continuity of care, that is a consideration. Lastly is where you are in the calendar year, meaning are you looking to, do you have 2 months left in the year, or do you still have 12 months left in the year? And what type of spend have you realized year to date? If I had, say, satisfied my out-of-pocket maximum for the year, I had a line of sight to meaningful health insurance expenses, and there's still several months in the year, well, in that scenario, I may even choose to pay a little bit higher premiums to stay with COBRA if it meant guaranteeing that I have no additional expenses for the balance of the calendar year. So again, just three high-level scenarios in which we find that's the commonality behind COBRA being a good option. Whether or not you elect COBRA, eventually you find yourself having to migrate to the individual market or private market. I'll use those terms synonymously today. But the individual market is actually fairly straightforward. Next slide, please. But it's straightforward in the sense that there is, well, hey, your zip code dictates what companies are available. Your ages dictate the price. As a family unit, your cost will be a function or an aggregate of everyone's individual cost. And there's a high degree of standardization across the private insurance market, which brings some degree of simplicity and some advantages as well. Once you see, or let's say in a given county, you might have 25 or 30 plans available to you. So again, at first pass, trying to find a way to adequately protect yourself and your family and your assets across 35 choices, it can seem overwhelming. But that standardization that I talk about, what I mean is that there's effectively 4 tiers of coverage to generalize. And among those 4 tiers, at each respective tier, the plans will offer identical benefits across the various insurers that are available to you. So a silver plan is a silver plan is a silver plan, regardless of what insurer you go to. So if there's plan parity, what is the difference? That comes down to 2 things. Number one is the cost they charge. And that correlates directly to number two, which is the network of doctors whom you have access to. So when we start looking at individual plans, it becomes an exercise in understanding, hey, what are my requirements, my anticipated needs? Therefore, what's the right level of coverage for me? And then it's a function of who's going to offer you the best combination of cost and doctor networks, because that's the difference between them. One thing that's very unique or cool for individual insurance that we don't see on the employer-sponsored side is the ability to really right level your coverage for you. As an example, there may be a family member who has more meaningful needs and, again, line of sight to known expenses where we can be more strategic, and they might require a higher tier. Let's call it a platinum level plan, whereas the rest of the members may be, the average guy who tries to avoid the doctor at all costs, right? There may be an opportunity to move to a much lower cost, traditional high deductible plan. So just because somebody necessitates a platinum, higher cost, richer benefit plan, that doesn't necessitate that everyone potentially overspend to overinsure themselves. So again, we want to be real strategic and pointed around what we select, knowing that we can make different elections for different people. So once we know what we want to get from a plan level, there's two paths to applying. One is to go directly to the insurance company. The other is to go buy that same plan from the same company with all the same benefits and doctor networks, but to purchase that by way of Covered California, which I'm sure we've all heard of. But Covered California is merely a conduit for submitting your application. That's all it is. There's a handful of reasons why we might choose one path over another. In some cases, one represents a smoother, faster, easier approval. Most commonly, one chooses the Covered California path because that's the route you need to take if you're eligible to claim a cost reduction or a subsidy. And I think it's important to call out that we shouldn't just blanket disqualify ourselves or qualify ourselves out of Covered California and potential upside. What I hear routinely from clients, or I see that they're surprised to see just how rich the benefits could be or the subsidies could be, and the amount of income one can still earn while still receiving some type of assistance, right? So the point is that across California, they've taken great measures to make health insurance as available and as inexpensive, a word we don't associate with health insurance, as inexpensive as possible. So we don't want to think this is something for the destitute in this case. Point being, well, actually, I'll give you an example here. Bay Area, San Francisco, hypothetical family of four. Let's assume a couple of adults in their mid-50s, a few teenage or two teenage children. In that scenario, they could have a forecasted income in 2024 of $250,000 while still receiving a monthly cost reduction of just over $1,000 per month. So we're talking about a $12,000 annual savings. And that same hypothetical family could have income upwards of $320,000 before the subsidy phases out entirely. So the message here is don't leave money on the table. It's something that deserves at least a brief consideration, and especially at a point in one's life where theoretically you're gaining a lot more control over how and when you draw your income. So there's a number of strategic methodologies that we can apply to this to kind of piggyback on all the upside that individual coverage has from a financial standpoint. A few things of kind of housekeeping that they go hand in hand with individual coverage and pitfalls to avoid. These are the fact that we're making calendar year decisions. It's easy to get caught up in the mindset of as I age, something may happen. I may be needing to protect myself against unknown injury or illness that might take place in the future. Well, yes, there's always this element of uncertainty. Just know that from a health insurance standpoint, we have an annual election window whereby you can make changes to your health insurance. There is no concept of pre-existing conditions. There is no health underwriting. As long as we are in that open enrollment period, if there's a better option, you're going to enroll in that better option and you're guaranteed the right to do so. So the point is you want to it's not a set and forget mentality. It is just like any good financial plan. There is a regular cadence of checkpoints whereby you'll be doing some inflection to realize in 2025, for example, do I stay the course as is, or has my situation or the marketplace changed such that I'm better suited going elsewhere? Outside of open enrollment, there are other life events that will come into play. Example is your children go off to college. Well, when they go to university, they'll more likely have access to a university-sponsored plan. And I will say confidently that 9 times out of 10, that's the better option. It's going to be more well-suited for them, especially if they're traveling, across the country or out of state. And it should be, in most cases, more economical in that respect as well. So again, this is always an exercise in making sure that you have appropriate coverage for each of the individuals based on their needs, but that we're doing it as economically or cost effectively as possible. So going off to university, it could be an opportunity to remove them from your individual plan, get something more appropriate at a lower cost. You might decide to take a seat on a board, which now gives you access to their employer plan. Again, these kind of checkpoints, or I'll say life events, are points of inflection to ask yourself, am I still on the right course from a health insurance standpoint? Ultimately, one thing we know is we all age into Medicare. That happens at age 65 years old. So if you ever think that health insurance is confusing or overwhelming, just wait till you get to Medicare. That's it. That's an entirely different beast altogether. Luckily, there are qualified professionals who can help with that transition. The takeaway for today's purpose, though, the upside, the silver lining, is that Medicare will undoubtedly give you significantly more coverage and benefits at significantly lower costs. Just as a rough example, there are Medicare supplement plans out there to be had for under a couple of $100s a month that will effectively cover 100% of your expenses. So think of this as we're bridging a gap in time, right? Individual health insurance is not the end all be all. It's a stopgap fix until we get to Medicare, where we'll all be more pleased with our healthcare system. Again, kind of an oxymoron there, but let's go through some examples. And I'll make a comment on timing. Is oftentimes I hear that, hey, Jeff, I'm thinking about retiring in 2026 or 3 years from now. What are my options? And my response there would be, it's not a productive exercise to try to get granular and make decisions now, because you're making decisions based on incomplete information. Your needs are likely to change. The marketplace will distinctly change. We know prices change annually and they tend to go up, not down. What is productive is to understand a rough order of magnitude, right? This is a placeholder figure. We need to ask ourselves, hey, am I accustomed to a PPO with ultimate flexibility? In which case, what type of figure should I have in my mind or in my financial plan as a budgetary figure going forward? So that's what we'll talk about on the next slide here with a few examples. These are not specific to any one individual. Apologies, we talked about this, so I'm going to go forward one more. This is not unique to any one individual, but hopefully this leaves the audience with some relative concept, and we'll close this out. I'll give you some resources to look more specifically for yourself. But we talked about the family of 4. This is what I referenced earlier, by the way, with the subsidies and what cost reductions might be available. But at market price, at face value, that family of 4 for a PPO is going to range between $3,200 and just under $5,000. All of these ranges that you see reflect the spectrum, right? There's high deductible health plans that give some basic services with the copay and pretty much leave you paying everything else until you satisfy said high deductible. Other end of the spectrum is a more robust, lower copays, longer list of services with copays, and zero deductible plans. So there's opportunity, again, to right fit for what makes sense for you. But again, the exercise is to help you understand a little bit more around what is the cost spectrum. I think as we're insured by way of employers whose plans are highly subsidized by employer, it's sometimes difficult or maybe even a shock to understand the true cost of health insurance these days. So we're going to close this out with a A quick summary here, which is, again, for roughly half of you, COBRA will be a good option, which is great. You should assess that and compare it to what would alternatively be the best outcome for you on the individual market, while accounting for some of those considerations that I mentioned earlier. From there, we'll transition to the individual market. That's somewhat inevitable based on this conversation. So we just want to be really strategic and understand what our options are and the junctures in the decision tree whereby you can make changes. Again, being strategic in terms of who's covered where and when it's time to migrate individuals to different plans or different options altogether. Lastly is use your resources. Most people probably aren't even aware that professional health insurance advisors exist. That's okay. We are out here, and we're here to take an unbiased look at your situation and help guide you, or more importantly, just educate you such that you can make an informed decision. We say commonly that we don't care what a client chooses as long as they're operating on complete information. In terms of other resources, the Covered California website, you'll see it here. It's a great way to spot check different scenarios. It's as easy as putting in your zip code, your ages, and if you want to put in an income estimate, help you understand that rough order of magnitude for you, or what that spectrum looks like for you in your family makeup. So on that note, hopefully we all just have at least some additional context around how to navigate that market. I thank you, and I'm going to hand it back to Joe.
Thank you so much, Jeff and Mandy. So Mandy and Jeff have been talking a lot about, well, can I retire? How are you guys going to help me know I can retire? And retirement it's a word that gets interchangeably used with, Mandy mentioned a few times, work optional, and she talked about you may or may not walk away from work, but the idea is this is a time in your life where you have the ability to walk away from work if you want to, because you no longer need to work for a paycheck. You've accumulated enough assets that are going to generate the kind of income, or you have other income sources that are going to pay for the things that you need to pay for. Obviously, chief among those are retirement, or is healthcare. But it's interesting because it's all about the can I retire? And what I'm going to talk a little bit is, well, do you want to? So in the 25 years that I've been doing this, I have worked with several clients who have wanted to retire, so they said, for about 20 years. And they're still working, not because they need to from an income perspective, but because there's so much more that they get from work than just the income. And, Mandy, and when you were talking about some of your slides around preparing for and accumulating, and because to the extent I do this ahead of stop working, it allows me to accomplish what I want to accomplish in that next phase of my life, or make a greater impact in that next phase of my life. And so this is what I'm going to talk about a little bit. And we can go to the next slide. How do I transition into this time of my life in a way that is successful? What is the secret to doing this successfully? And so what we have on this slide, and we did a couple of blogs that we put on our website. If we were to go to summitry.com to the Insights tab, you could find some of these blogs we did. And one of these was The Secret to a Successful Retirement. It's really kind of a context piece where what are the things that we got to work, because it's not just income. People don't necessarily think explicitly around all of the relationships that they have at work and how meaningful those relationships are to them. People do think about the fact that they're contributing back to the world in a way that they feel valuable and it's meaningful for them, and they feel like a purpose in their life. And with financial security, we talked a lot about that, and we talked about some health too. But something I want to say about health that maybe is a little apart from what Jeff was saying, there's physical health and there's mental health. And something that work provides is a routine every day. There is a routine that you're following. There is a schedule that you're following. And there's a lot of health-related benefits that come from that. And so if you're going to stop working for a paycheck, and maybe you won't stop completely. Maybe you'll practice this thing we call retirement, and you'll just work part-time and you'll earn a paycheck. But a lot of that is about maintaining the relationships, maintaining that routine, maintaining a way of giving back to the world in ways you want to. So the idea is, though, to define those. So when we sit down with people and we talk about putting together a financial plan and can they afford to retire, and by afford we mean can they live comfortably for the rest of their lives, but also give to the things they want to give to, spend on the things they want to spend on. That's what we mean by financial security. But we also sit down and talk, well, what do you want to do with at this time in your life? How do you want to be spending your time? Who do you want to be spending it with? All of these things are very important things to be talking about with, in your family. And so if you go to the blog that we did write on the secret to a successful retirement, there's also some resources that we include in there, hyperlinks to resources that you could read and research it some more, like how you can kind of give more thought to these things and plan for them. So that if you are somebody who is still working 20 years after you said you didn't want to work anymore, it's because you're getting that much out of it. So the next thing I want to talk about just quickly here is I had the benefit of interviewing a client of ours who the blog is called Diaries of a Bay Area Retiree, and it's episode 1, and we'll have others on there. So Anne, you can go to the next slide. And so I interviewed this client, married, 3 children. He has some grandchildren now. And I talked with him about not just his retirement. He's been in retirement for handful of years now, but I talked with him about his career and how he got into the career he got into and why, and what was important to him about what that career was, and how did he get joy out of that. And we went through the whole thing. And if you think about this, there's this time in your life, you're making a decision about going into retirement, but it's not the first decision point. You're making decisions all along the way. And this quote that's here, and there was a question, are we going to send out these slides? Yes, there'll be a recording and we'll send out the slides so everyone will have access to these. But what he was saying here is there were several different decisions he had to make along the way and deciding on what would be best for him and his family. And he's not making those decisions on his own. He's making those with the people he loves. And so all of you will be doing that too, as you sort of think about going into this time in your life. And we're happy to create that space for you and your loved ones too, to be talking about it. Go to the next slide. I love this this concept. I had not heard it phrased this way before, and he had said it. I did not want to get to a place where I just decided to stop working and then there would be a void. I wanted to crowd work out. It's just this interesting concept of it takes up so much of our time, and that can sometimes feel overwhelming. And Mandy talked about burnout, but there are so many benefits of that time that it's taking up too. And because if it's not taking up that time, we need to fill that time with something else to feel like that we're living our life the way we want to live our life. So how are we going to crowd work out? Because if you don't, it will crowd itself back in every single time. So I love that he said this. It was just very interesting. And so last slide on this area, we are in the business of it with the financial planning that we do to help our clients make the progress that they want to make in their life, to have the happiness and to find and keep the happiness that they want to have in their life. We want to help them grow and keep their assets. We want to help them minimize their taxes so they keep more of their assets, but we also want to help them find happiness and keep that happiness and throughout that time in their life. And there's something that he said that I didn't put the quote in here, but I want to kind of end at least this part of the talk on this. He said, and this is true for whether you're thinking about retiring early or even beyond 60s, 70s, but I think even if you're 20 years old, this is relevant what he said. He said, the number of things that you shouldn't do is infinite. The number of things you should do is finite. And so just thinking about making choices that matter for you and your family, and then putting those things into practice at all points throughout your life. And we love the opportunity to work through all of those things with you, but certainly in this part of your life as well. So mental readiness is something certainly to be giving a lot of thought to be successful in this time in your life, in whatever ways that means to you. It is personal to each person. Last thing I'll just say before we start the Q&A, and again, if you have questions, you can type them into the Q&A box, and then we'll go to work on answering those. And if you go to the next slide. So recently, one of our colleagues, senior financial advisor at the firm, Ken Vanderkooy wrote up a piece that is on our website, summitry.com, Insights, with the 4/15 tax filing deadline approaching. We wanted people to know that it's not too late to take advantage of some strategies to either reduce the amount of taxes that you have to pay for 2023, or perhaps just be thinking about things that you can do based on what happened in 2023 that allows you to grow and optimize your assets and income over your lifetime by tax minimization. So still more things you can do.
And I just want to add that if you're thinking about, as we talk about tax planning, if you're thinking about what you can do for 2024 tax year, like what you can do to best position yourself for 2024 tax year, we did do our last financial planning webinar is on this exact topic, and not a whole lot have changed in November of last year to now. So the blog is for what you can still do for 2023, but if you want to think about 2024, check out our last webinar in November.
Perfect. Thank you, Mandy. All right. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, so we'll start the questions now. Okay, so the first question I got, and Jeff, this is going to be for you.
Oh.
Okay, so if my child goes on a university medical plan, and then I assume they have continued coverage during school breaks, when they come home, can I put them back on my plan when they graduate and before they turn 26?
So two-parter. Number one is all university plans are different. That said, they generally conform to one norm. And that is, yes, when they're off away for summer break, they come home with coverage. If they're home, when they leave campus, the coverage is theirs, just like any other health insurance goes with us. So again, something you have to qualify or look at specifically with each university plan, but the answer is yes. Can you put them back on once they're done? Absolutely. So that is a qualifying event, and just think of it to generalize as any involuntary loss of coverage will entitle you to the right to go procure replacement coverage. So when they graduate, that coverage is no longer available to them. Maybe they're going on their own employer plan, or yes, you can put them on yours through or to age 26.
Perfect. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, so actually, in this next question, it's about Medicare. So this will be for you, Jeff, too. And we didn't mention, one of the nice things about working with Jeff's company. So we talked a lot about how do you pre-Medicare figure out the best insurance plan for you and your family. But also there is a portion of Jeff's company that they are Medicare experts. And so we do also refer clients on to them who are past 65 and having to every year choose a Medicare plan, really, because it is a year by year decision, at least with some aspects of it, like the Medigap parts of it. But so anyway, great resource for Medicare years as well. So the question is, what about Medicare supplement options and dental and optical coverage after retirement?
Yeah. So, and thanks for the plug, Joe. We do all things health insurance, be that sub 65 or Medicare as well. That's all in our wheelhouse. So Medicare, I'm not sure the question, what about Medicare supplement options? The answer is there are a plethora of them. Which one is going to be appropriate for you or best for you is going to be a very specific formula of your specific drugs, if any, even your pharmacies, your doctors. These are all variables that go into choosing the right Medicare plan, be that Medicare Advantage or Medicare Supplement. So the answer is yes, lots of options there, and it's smart to get some professional guidance. As far as dental or vision go, these exist. They are the same products that are available to us on the individual sub 65 market are the products that we would be recommending for Medicare as well. So those are consistent. Think of them as private dental and vision, and it's not a function of being tied to Medicare or not.
Okay, Mandy, I want to have you talk about the sunset of the tax laws that went into effect in 2018, I think. But before I do, I'll come to that question in a second. But Jeff, just on what are some of the, because not everybody has access to a professional resource to help them decide on what Medigap policy to choose every year because how many letters are there? It's like the alphabet, I feel like. But what are some of the pitfalls that people or the risks or the things that people do without having had the advice that end up working badly for them? But if they figure it out the right thing, it's like they avoid those and they're set up better. Like, what are some of those things?
Yeah, so I would say one thing specifically, there's a lot of nuances as it relates to COBRA, and there's a lot of regulation around timelines for enrolling. So you have an 8-month window to enroll before or after your 65th birthday, yet you have a 3-month window to enroll if you're already 65 and are coming off a COBRA plan. And the list goes on. I won't list them all. The point is that it is highly nuanced, and you can, if you miss the window, it can have long-standing implications to the tune of a 20% increase in your premiums that last in perpetuity forever. So to your initial statement, Joe, is not everyone has access to professionals. I would argue otherwise, that there's, you should find them though. And this is a public service announcement, which is sadly, specifically Medicare, that discipline of health insurance. It is a space that's littered with bad actors, which is also why it's so highly regulated. So number one is if somebody is contacting you, that's probably not the individual you want to work with, because cold calling, it's an industry no-no. So again, it's something that happens. I read a stat during this last open enrollment that the average American got 7 phone calls a week around the open enrollment when they're eligible for Medicare. All 7 of those phone calls would be illegal. So as long as you're seeking out the coverage and working with a trusted professional, there is guidance, and working with professionals doesn't cost you anything, or it should never cost you anything, because ultimately insurance companies pay the brokerage fee on your behalf. So your price will always stay the same. There's a number of resources out there like myself who can help with that transition. I hope that answered the question.
It does, but that's a kind of a key thing. So, I mean, this idea that's the average number of calls to people in open enrollment period 7, and these are all illegal. How are and nobody should be, it's the insurance companies that are paying the people giving the advice, or how are those people asking to be paid?
So it ranges. Some people will actually tack on an additional fee, and if you're not looking, you could end up be paying them an ongoing fee. Those are outliers. Assuming they're licensed and registered agents, they get compensated the same way. So I made the comment, which is your price is a function of age and location, effectively. That is mostly true for the Medicare space as well, but you have a cost associated with you, and that's unique to you. And no matter buying it on your own, trying to navigate this separately, or working with broker A or broker B or C, that price will remain the same. So anyone who offers that assistance is or should be compensated for their time by way of the insurance company. Again, it's zero impact to the consumer.
Okay.
And that's true of the bad actors as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I had mentioned briefly, I had said early on when I was saying that Mandy, she's an enrolled agent, so the firm does not file tax returns for clients, but we do offer a lot of tax planning guidance. And Mandy, as an enrolled agent, she is one of our in-house experts in all things tax. And so I would love for you, Mandy, to maybe share a bit with people joining us about things they should be thinking about over the next year and a half, year or so before the Jobs Act sunsets at the end of 2025.
Yes. Thank you, Joe, for the question. So you probably see some headline, or start seeing a lot of headline about the sunset of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act by the end of 2025. And this was fully scheduled. This was something that we know for the last 6.5 years, that it's going to be sunset at the end of 2025. We did, in our last webinar, we did talk about this for about 20 minutes. So I would recommend you, if you want more detail, to come back. But in general, depending on your bracket, the thing that happened most impactful to our client, I would think, is one, there would be a general increase in terms of marginal tax brackets across the board. particularly for client in the middle. So you're thinking about retiree with 200 to 300,000 in income and don't have a lot of itemized deduction. The other big thing that very impactful is for clients who in high income tax bracket right now and pay a lot of state income tax, that state and local tax now will come back as a deduction on the itemized deductions, and the standard deduction going to be cut by half, meaning it going back to where it was before. So what I like to say is all the old thing become news again. So the time is for like all of we have to forget all of the thing about the old tax law, and now we have to relearn all of these things. So there's planning opportunity that we cover quite deeply in the last tax planning webinar that I would suggest our audience come back and have a look at the recording.
Well, yeah, and I think a takeaway there too is while this doesn't sunset until the end of 2025, it's not too early to start planning around steps to take. It's interesting. I was talking with, there's the tax side of this, but then there's the whole, how does this affect people's estate planning as well, because of the estate tax exemption and all of that. And there was an estate planning attorney that said to me, everybody is going to be calling us in whatever, March or June 2025. So if you wait till then to call us, you might not be able to get in front of us until January 2026, and that'll be too late. So we want our clients to get a head start on these things, so that just get out in front of it.
And then for the income tax side of things, like if there's big decision that you're making, we only have 2 years. Like one of the things I hear a lot from clients is, I'm gonna continue making the same type of income for the next 5-6 years. Why do I have to start doing all of these things now? But the thing is, there might be an unique opportunity for 2024 and 2025, assuming we have a new tax law coming in 2026.
I just want to understand this because Mandy, there was a slide, or when you were talking about some the client who you were working with, I can't remember, I think it was Suzanne, but maybe it was David Catherine. You were talking about how they were maintaining purchasing power over the life of the plan. There was a little bit of a dip there after they stopped working because expenses are higher. There's still maybe mortgage, kid expenses, all that kind of stuff, and then kind of evens out and sort of adjusted for inflation, maintaining their purchasing power throughout the life of the plan. And then you showed a scenario where there was it was a Roth conversion.
Yeah, that's the Roth conversion.
But the idea is that there may be initially some more taxes that you're paying, but then that green at the end was how that then turned into a benefit for that client. As it relates to estate tax exemption, as it relates to some of these things we're talking about, taxes, say more about how important that is to have those Roth IRA assets at the end versus traditional IRA assets at the end.
Well, so assuming that you are one of the individuals that potentially facing some estate tax. So just a quick overview. Estate tax currently now is at about 16.6 million per individual. So a married filing couple would have over 26 million. But that is scheduled to be cut by half after the sunset in 2025. What it means is a married filing jointly couple only have 13 to 14 million in exemptions. And if you're thinking about some of that might be houses that are illiquid, so you can get up to that point very quickly before you even realize. Now, if after you use up your exemption, so your 14 million, anything over the exemption amount will be taxed at 40%. The tricky thing with IRA money is it's also passed through income tax to your kid. So it's not only subject to the 40% estate tax, but that amount is taxable income to your children. And you're probably aware this is happening in 2020. Now, when your children inherit the IRA, they only have 10 years to fully distribute the IRA. And many of our clients, particularly clients who in their 60s, 70s, have 4 or 5 million in IRA money. And by the time the children inherit the money, the children also in their 40 and 50, and we actually I personally working with many of the children in the situation, and they in the prime time of their career. And they also already in the higher tax bracket, and now they have this 200,000 income every year that they have to pay tax on at the higher tax bracket. So to the extent that we can pre-plan from the parent generation to pay tax at the lower bracket and give their kid the Roth IRA that come out that they still have to deplete within 10 years, but there's no tax implication. It's completely tax-free. That for the whole family, it become a very powerful vehicle. And just for the couple themselves, like when I show for Dave and Kate, for themselves to pay tax when they don't have any other tax implication, and pay tax when they are in a lower tax bracket is also benefited them. But again, Joe, thank you for pointing out the second layer.
Yeah, no, it's a I'm going to end on this concept of pre-planning, but there's another question we have about Medicare, and we just got a couple of minutes. It'll be the last question that we take here. But so Jeff, what is your guidance for comparing Medicare Advantage versus Medicare Supplement?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And again, I will say the best possible outcome will be largely a function of your unique situation. And I can't emphasize that enough, right? Even I mentioned medications. It's not just the medication, it's the dosage and the frequency and the pharmacy in which you buy it from. That said, I'm going to make kind of a high level comparison and say that a supplement plan is going to cost marginally more. Medicare Advantage plans can be had, frankly, at zero cost in many cases, but they're going to be a lower cost and they're going to be more restrictive in the network of doctors whom you have access to. So again, lower cost. To my earlier statements around lower cost generally equates to lower choice and flexibility, which a smaller network is not a bad thing as long as they have the physicians who are important to you. By contrast, a supplement is going to cost a little bit more. But what I like about it is that it does limit your exposure more, meaning it's going to have a true out-of-pocket maximum such that, there are better guardrails in place to say, it doesn't matter what happens, I'm not risking my estate or all of my assets as a result of this, which an extreme example, but that's a feasible outcome on the Advantage side. So not saying one is better than the other, but there's a time and a place for both.
Great, thank you, Jeff. All right, well, so we have come up on the hour and we didn't get through all the questions. So here's what I'd say. I'd say if you asked a question and it didn't get answered and you are a client of Summitry's and you're anonymous, for those of you who put your name, we can see and we can reach out to you. But for those of you who put anonymous attendee, just reach out to your advisor and we'll get your question. We want to get your questions answered for you. If you're not a client of Summitry and you'd like for us to answer your question, we'd welcome a call from you, of course. And be whatever value and help we can be. At the end of the day, I mean, that's what this is about. I mean, that is why we exist. I mean, we talked a lot about pre-planning and the idea, with anything, the sooner you get on thinking about the steps that you can take to put yourself in a position where you can have the life you want to have and be making the progress you want to be making and spending the time you want to be spending with the people you want to be spending it with and the ways you want to be spending it. That is why we exist. And how do you do all of that from a financial perspective? How do you make sure that you're taking care of your health and your well-being, both mental and physical? We will feel like we've done what we were put on this planet to do. So thank you very much, Jeff, for your contribution, and Mandy, yours, and then all of you for joining us today. Of course, like I said, there will be a replay that is sent out along with the slides. Thank you very much.
Thank you.